Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Note 6, the final notes of the chapter. And it's a lot different than the previous notes because we're talking about circles on the coordinate plane. And a lot of people would find this notes the easiest of the chapter. A circle is a set of all points equidistant from a fixed point, the center. And when we look at this drawing, this is our fixed point, the center of the circle. We have a certain distance xy. And if you can imagine keeping that center where it is and keeping that distance the same and rotating, you would form that circle. So xy is any point on the circle, and there's an infinite number of points on the circle. HK is that fixed center, and R is that fixed radius. Okay, so HK is the center, R is the radius. It says find the equation of a circle using the distance formula. Well, the distance formula is D equals the square root, and it's a version of the Pythagorean theorem. And in the distance formula, you would subtract the x's. Well, the x's here are x minus h, right? Those are the x's, x and h. And y and k are the y values. But it's not going to be d, it's going to be r because it's a radius, right? That distance is r. And I'm going to simplify this by getting rid of that square root by squaring both sides. And that is the standard equation for a circle. I'm going to write that again, but this time I'm going to put the r squared on the other side. So x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. It's a version of the distance formula. And of course, the distance formula is a version of the Pythagorean theorem. So this is just the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, so you're going to need to memorize that equation. And if I was doing a problem like number 1, I would look at this and say, okay, these are the h and the k, and this is the r squared. Now, in the formula, it's a minus. So when I see x plus 2, that tells me the center is negative 2 comma something. See how it says minus 1? Well, the formula is minus k. So that minus 1 means that's 1. So it's the opposite of those two numbers. You can also say it's the number that would make this 0, right? Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. 1 minus 1 is 0. So however you think about that, you could find the center just by doing the opposite of those two numbers. R squared, R squared, if I can write, equals 9. You do the square root of that and you get r equals 3. So you don't put a positive or negative, there's only a positive radius, and it's simply just the square root of that number. So r equals 3. So I'm going to go over here and go to negative 2, 1, and I need to go 3 in each direction. I can go 3 right, that's easy. I can go 3 left, that's easy. 3 up and 3 down. But I need to draw a circle. So I don't want to go 3 diagonally. Okay, this is not 3 spaces. That's 3 diagonal spaces, which are not equal to 1 space. So don't go 3 that way. When you draw your circle, a lot of times people don't draw them round enough. They'll do something like this. Okay, that's not round enough. 2 round looks like this. People rarely do something like that, but that's what 2 round looks like. So try to get as round as you can without making it look like a 4-leaf clover. And there you got a circle. And just do the best circle you can. It's not art class, so you just do the best you can. In this problem, it just says x squared. So, x minus what would give you just plain x, and that's 0. So when it's like this, the center would be 0 and 0. So if you see a plain x squared or plain y squared, those are zeros. Take the square root of that number, 5, plot 0, 0, 5 in each direction. Draw the best circle you can. And you're done. Okay, moving on. 3 sets finding the center and radius. So we're not graphing here. For A, it's negative 4, 4, negative 4, negative 4. And the R is the square root of 1, which is just 1. For B, it's negative 2, opposite of that number. Opposite number is positive 8, so negative 2, 8. R is the square root of 100, which is 10. For B, opposite of that number, negative 3. No number, that's 0. I'm going to do the square root of 8. Square root of 8 is a decimal, or you can simplify it to 2 root 2. And that's how you want to leave that for these kind of problems. But if you were graphing, you'd want to find out what the square root of 8 is as a decimal so that you can estimate that and draw a graph. D, 0, 0 is my center. Square root of 16 gives me 4. Now, when we get to problem 4, these are the opposite. They're asking us to write the equation. Okay, so it's x minus this number. You know what, let me write the equation down here so we can see it again. So it's x minus 3, don't forget to write the squared, plus y minus, and this is negative 9. Now, don't leave it as y minus negative 9. Y minus negative 9 changes into a plus 9. So when it's a negative, remember it's opposite. So if it's negative, it's going to be a plus. If it's positive, it's going to be a minus. So y plus 9. Don't forget the squared. And this is r squared, so you take 4 and square it, 16. Okay, next problem. Center 0, 0. So that gives me x squared plus y squared equals. And I need to do 3 root 5 squared. Let me do that on the side here. 3 root 5 squared. There's a variety of ways that people do this, but I'm going to do 3 squared and root 5 squared. 3 squared is 9. Root 5 squared means root 5 times root 5, which is the square root of 25, which is plain old 5. And 9 times 5 is 45, and that's the number that would go there. Okay, moving on to C. X minus negative 2 would change to plus 2. Y minus negative 3 would change to plus 3, remember, which is the opposite. It says the diameter is 11, so don't get tricked by that. You would take out your calculator and do half of 11, which of course is 5.5, and square it. Now, 30.25 is not a rounded value. That's an exact value, so that's fine to leave. 30 and 1/4 is fine. Now, the next one is different, and you do need to know how to do a problem like this. It says the center is 3, negative 2. Okay, no problem there. Nothing unusual about that. But we don't know the radius, and it says containing the point 7, 2. So I'm going to write r squared here, and we just don't know that r squared yet. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the x and the y out. And then I'm going to say, if our circle contains this point, it means that point must make the equation true. So I'm going to put 7 and 2 in, because I know that is a point on the circle, therefore it must make the equation true. Now I'm going to figure out what all this equals. 7 minus 3 is 4, square root of 16, plus 2 plus 2 is 4, squared is 16, and 16 plus 16 is 32. 32 equals r squared. I don't actually have to find r. R is the square root of 32, but in my equation, I want r squared. So r squared equals 32. So now I go back and I get rid of some of this red stuff here, and I say, okay, let's get rid of that, let's get rid of that, and let's get rid of this r squared. Okay, change back to purple. So it was x minus 3 squared. It was a plus 2. And I'm just going to make that back into y. It was a plus 2 because this was negative. Okay. And I found that to be 32. It was 32, so I'm just going to plop a 32 in there. And that's my answer. We're going to do that same thing again 2 more times. So I'm going to write x minus 5 squared plus y minus 4 squared, those are those two numbers, equals r squared. The center goes there. This is just a random point on the circle. And I'm going to plug that in to each x and y. And then I'm going to figure out what that equals. 9 minus 5 is 4 squared. 7 minus 4 is 3 squared, which is 16 plus 9, which is 25. Again, I don't need to find that r equals 5, right? R equals 5, because that's the square root of 25, but I don't need that. I want to know what r squared is. So now all I need to do is go back up here where that r squared that I didn't know before, and then just say, okay, that's 25. Problem's over. So you're just temporarily plugging these numbers in, finding r squared, and then putting that in, and then you're done. Okay. Let's do it again. I'll try to write a little smaller here. Okay, so here's my center. So x minus 6 squared plus y minus 6 squared equals, don't know this, r squared. I don't know the length of this radius. That's the problem. So I take this point that I do know is on the circle and I temporarily plug it in. (12 minus 6 is 6 squared. This is negative 6 squared. Leave it in parentheses. You need that negative in parentheses because when you square these should both come out positive. 36 and 36 equals r squared. 72 equals r squared. This was my answer, except I didn't know r squared. So now I know r squared. So I put it in here. 72. Problem's over. There's your answer. Oops. Okay. So that's all.